to welcome the guy who is already known, from what I understand, as the Ted Lasso of public transportation in Massachusetts. Phil Lang. Phil, it's a pleasure to meet you.
Well, nice to meet you, Jim. Nice to meet you, Margie. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for coming in. But, you know, I got to ask, you've had great success in your career. You're running you're the president of the Long Island Railroad. You're interim president of New York City Transit. You've got a great pension. You've got a wonderful life. You know, the T has been the whipping boy here for about 20 years, or maybe 30 or 40 years. You know, runaway trains and people jumping off the Orange Line, et cetera, et cetera. Why did you want to do this?
Well, you know, I had retired, and I had gone into private sector for 9 months.
Yeah.
And I look forward to continuing to serve public agencies in that role. But as I continued to read things about the challenges that were ongoing, you kind of get your mind thinking, how can you help them? First from the private side, but then the opportunity came up to take on the challenge and take ownership of the responsibility. And there's something about public service that, despite how challenging it can be, and maybe even initially you look at it and say, how can you accomplish that? The rewards are so phenomenal in terms of the importance to the public, importance to the workforce that rely on the management to guide and advise and direct. You know, so when the opportunity came up, it was something I spoke with my family about, and sure enough, they gave me an opportunity to jump back into public service.
Well,
I'm really proud to do that.
I think we can all agree that if you can fix the MBTA in Boston, you're going to go down in the Mass Transit Hall of Fame, Guinness Book of World Records, all those kinds of things. You
know, by the way, we should also say, so you're not defensive, we like masochists on this show, so we don't have a problem with that. You know, when through the days, I was looking at some of the old texts and emails we get about the T on a bad day, and I was trying to figure out what is the most common question or concern, the least we get, which is obviously anecdotal as opposed to what you do. It's the slow zone thing. And when I listened to an interview you did on BUR a couple of days ago and read things, it seems that even though you're a transparent kind of guy, Phil Lang, that you're reluctant to say, here's the date by which our plan has an end to slow zones. Isn't that something you think the riding public, or hopefully the wannabe riding public, is entitled to?
Well, you know what? It comes across as, if it came across as reluctance, it wasn't meant to be that way. What the challenge that we have with providing a definitive schedule moving forward is that the slow zones are a moving target in some respects. Right? We'll continue to do inspections, which we have to do, and as we identify conditions, we want to make sure they're incorporated. But also there's other types of things that affect our scheduling with regards to the amount of work we do, and that's reviewing, even if we have a schedule laid out in our mindset, it's looking ahead. Are we doing that on straight overnights? Are we doing that on extended hours? Or are we doing that on weekends? Or are we doing that like on a 12-day surge like we did at the Packett's Corner? So those things are constantly being discussed as we're approaching different sections. And I think a lot of it has to do with how much work needs to be done within that area and what is the least impactful and provides the most benefit to our riders in those corridors.
So considering those variables, Phil Lang, and I totally understand them, can you not give us at least a range that if it turns out you're doing overnight things where there's the most intense focus in the shortest period of time, it's likely to take X months. If it turns out you do it on a less intense schedule for a variety of reasons, less interference with the daily ridership, that sort of thing, it takes Y number of months. Is that, I assume in your head you have those numbers, don't you?
Yes, and we are working on putting together that type of higher level schedule on when we anticipate to get the different sections within the corridors. And that's something that we're working hard on to make sure we are more transparent, because it's not that we don't want to share this information, is we want to make sure that when we're sharing it, we have enough information for the folks that we're talking to, the businesses, the riders, that we're not disrupting their plans in advance before we have it a little more baked.
So one last question. So to be clear, you have the dates in your head. You're just not comfortable sharing them? Is that an accurate statement at this time?
We have general ideas of when we're tackling things. Right now, as we identify locations, for instance, we are focused on a lot of areas on the Red Line. The Red Line has a lot of delays, has a lot of areas where we need to improve upon. But we also want to make sure, like when we had the pivot, when we had the unfortunate derailment at Packett's Corner, right, we had to make a decision not only to address the immediate need, the emergency response, which we did, even that work took away from planned work because now the workforce that was going to do other things is focusing on restoring service and restoring it safely. But then we decided to make the right decision to accelerate that work. So that also affects those schedules. And those are the kinds of things where it is a fluid plan, and we need to be ready to pivot, making sure that we are tackling the conditions that we feel if we leave too long are going to impact further
But internally,
down the road.
I don't mean to belabor this last thing on this, but internally, at least in terms of your planning, you and your team have a pretty good idea of what that timeline is.
I wouldn't say the timeline. I would say when we're looking at tackling these things, the speed restrictions are things that are in place throughout the system. And when things are running well, you might not even notice there's a speed restriction on the line. Right now, the disinvestment that has happened over the years that got us to this point is, I think, why there's so much attention to it, because it is not just a red line, but we have it on other corridors.
You know what I've always wondered? Are we the worst in the country at this particular juncture? I mean, is there any place that's like us, or are there other places that are worse than us, or is it unusual? I mean, if we've all gone to New York, most of us. The T goes really fast in New York, even though it has its problems too. Where does Boston rank?
No, we're not worse in the country. I think what it is the importance of the T to the public, which is why there's so much attention to it, which is why I took on this role. Why the administration has given us the support and leadership that we need to make the changes that the public expects. If you go and you look across the country, and you'll see that a lot of the agencies have faced similar things. Not only from the hiring and retention, that's even in the private sector, but you'll also see that they have gone through periods of lack of investment, system safety, system reliability. But that doesn't mean we cannot turn this place around.
So who has the worst system right now in the whole country? Do you think it's Chicago, Philadelphia?
I wouldn't even touch that question.
Okay, well, you're speaking about, I'm just wondering if there's someone that's worse than us. You're speaking about hiring and retention. I know that there's a new contract now, 18% wage increase over 4 years. Maintenance workers, bus drivers, train drivers. For a while, the T was doing something really weird, which is have bus drivers be hired in a part-time schedule when they first came in. That's gone now, right? They're going to be hired in a full-time schedule when they first come in, the bus drivers, right?
Well, this contract allows us to have both full-time positions and part-time positions, which is important. Because the more part-time applicants we have, and some people need that part-time status, what we want is to have flexibility for anybody interested in performing work.
But if they want full-time, they don't have to wait.
Yes, they do not have to wait.
Okay. But even with that, there's a problem with attrition, people leaving. So what do you think that's about? They're just...
Well, public service is, I think you opened up. It is a tough business to be in public service, right? Everybody depends on us.
Bless you.
And every day we're judged by our daily performance, right? Being a bus driver, being a motor person, those are challenging jobs. Imagine trying to operate a bus in a city as dense as this with the amount of traffic. But what we've done is the contract has incentives for retention to encourage people to stay. It has incentives for people that have stayed longer, longevity payments. So a lot of the things that we've seen over the course of this year, and we have record hiring so far, but the challenges in terms of getting to where we want to be have been addressed, a lot of them in this contract. Retention, incentive, starting salary for some of our key positions, the bus operators, motor persons, rail repairers, and track workers. All of those positions are the foundation of the success. They fill and feed the promotional positions that we need to move into supervisory positions and further up. So we're working on workforce hiring, but working on workforce growth and succession planning. And all of that obviously takes time, but we are doing it at a pace and with the administration's support in the budget that gives us the ability for bonuses, the salary contract that we negotiated.
That's a $20 million thing you're talking about? Or
well, that is included in the budget now, and that gave us the ability to really tackle some of those challenges that we've had to date, knowing that those funds were part of the budget.
Do you know, I wondered, one of the stories I read in anticipation of speaking with you today talked about the high cost of living in Boston. I mean, that's going to be an issue, too, for people that may not be able to get anything within Boston, rent or buying, because it's so expensive. They may have to come in from, I don't know, Brockton or Fall River or something.
Well, and that's part of the reason we had to take a hard look at this contract, right? For prior to this contract, a lot of folks had to almost take a pay cut to come and be a bus operator, just as an example. And imagine the challenge now with all the rising costs of living and housing and food costs, just taking care of your family. That's a tough thing to ask people to do.
Yeah.
This contract now puts us on par with a lot of private sector entities that we are competing against. And, the one beautiful thing that has come out of this right now, in the first 10 days of August, we have seen a 129% increase in the applications for bus operators.
Wow.
Nearly 400 applications to date in August.
But, at the same time, to follow up on what Marjorie said, the most recent numbers I saw, maybe it was actually this morning in State House News Services, since the beginning of the year, you've hired 782 people, you lost 475. It's a net of 300 or something. That's going to take, at that rate, it's going to take a hell of a long time to get to your goal, but I guess your position is the changes you've made in the interim are going to speed that process?
Yes. If we did not have this contract and we continued on the same path, which is actually record hiring for us, right, we would have still hired probably about 1,500 new employees this year without any changes,
Understood.
right? The attrition, and you look at every public sector agency, it ebbs and flows, right? You do this tremendous hiring, and then when they reach eligible point, they're all walking out the door at the same time. So what we're going to do is not only bring the workforce back to where it needs to be, but we're not going to pause there. We're going to continue to make sure that we have the robust hiring annually, and then this way, somewhere down the road, 20, 30 years, we are making sure that we have kept our workforce.
Are you as calm as
strong.
you appear to be, or what's your real
He's got to
deal
be
with
calm.
you?
He's got to
No,
be
I'm
calm.
serious.
Otherwise, he'd be pulling his hair out.
You look totally calm in what has got to be a really difficult daily task. Are you? Or
You know what? I think you need to have that internal tension that keeps you driving, right? I always tell folks you need to be a little uncomfortable in order to be able to make change. At the same time, we need to keep our focus on the challenge at hand, because I think if we're running around in a mode where we don't have things under control, it just spirals out of.
That's what Marjorie and I do every day, by the way. Running around with things pretty much out of control.
Out of
and then
control.
2 o'clock comes and we go home.
Yeah,
So
we're
talking to Phil Lang, by the way, the new general manager of the T.
Yes, Phil, you just mentioned eligible point where people may leave, and one of the standing jokes about the T, you probably heard this before, it used to be like 23 years and out. You get in at 18, you can retire at 42 and get a pension. That's changed now, I understand. So how long do you have to work at the T before you can leave with a nice pension?
Well, I think what you have to do is reach a certain number of years,
Yep.
But also the age requirement. But that's something that's happening across a lot of public agencies, right? But I think what you need to do is focus on the public service component of the T, the ability to know that you're contributing to your communities that you live in, where your family and friends live, and your neighbors. But there's the other part. There are some significant benefits as part of being here. We have great health benefits. One of the things I'm focusing on is the career path that you can have at all entry levels and work your way through the system. You don't necessarily have to have a degree in something to excel. It's the operation component of being a bus operator, a motor person. Back in my previous job, a key person that I relied on heavily started as a car cleaner.
Really?
And worked his way up the career ladder. A lot of people do that. And that's where it's up for myself and my management team to make sure that we are helping people along the way, because there's so many people that are looking to make those career advancements at the T.
Phil Lang, a minute ago, you didn't want to answer Marjorie's question. I don't blame you. But what's the worst subway in the country? What's the best? What's the model where you say to yourself, I want to be like that system by the time my days are through here?
I know a lot of people compare us to systems across the seas, but I think what I also say is you really cannot compare what our T system is like. It's the oldest system in the U.S., right? And if you were designing a brand new system today, you wouldn't have the geometric curves and things of that nature that are inherent to the system.
Like at Park Street you're talking
about,
right?
That gives us the character that we have, right? It's the same thing from my prior job at Long Island Railroad. You have 10 of 11 main branches all merging in one location. Imagine if something happens at one location, it affects 10 branches. You wouldn't design it that way, but the effort that goes into the day-to-day operations, you'd be amazed what our dispatchers are doing, what the folks are doing to be able to deliver day-to-day service. And people take a lot of pride in that. And so when you look at the complexities that we have, I think that's something we should be very proud of, the fact that we do deliver the service we do under these environments where you would not design it this way if you had the ability to start over.
So what's an old system? I mean, the Metro, for example, in D.C. is relatively new. What's an old system, not unlike ours in terms of age, that you think has made the most progress from its low point that we might look to as a model? Is there such a place?
You know, I wouldn't look at each system. I would look at the ability to turn the systems around.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when I was at New York City Transit back in 2017, there were a lot of challenges there with regards to similar things: service, reliability, safety. And with an investment into the system, acceleration of work, reliability went up. Same thing at Long Island Railroad. Right? When I took over there in 2018, it was the same kind of thing where the public had lost faith in the system, and in 4 years turned it around and made it the best running on-time performance in its history. And we could do that here. We are making strides. I know it's not as fast as we all would like to do, but we are making forward progress.
And when you say people lose faith in the system, do they lose faith in the time, the reliability of the times, or I mean, what are the factors that cause people to say, I'm not going to bother anymore?
I think it has to do with knowing that when you walk to that station or when you get to that station, that train or that bus or that ferry will be there.
Yeah.
And then knowing that that travel time is reliable, right? In every system that I've worked in, the public acknowledges in an open system and open to the environment, weather, they know things happen. But what we need to do is get it back to where it is on a daily basis running reliably the way our service schedules show. But then also know that we are building towards a better future, that we will restore more service when we can, and we will make sure that it's safe, it's reliable, and people can take pride in it, because it's the same thing. I always talk about our stations as being like our living room. When you invite people to your home, you want them to feel good, right? So I want that the same thing with our stations, that when people come to our stations, when they have family and friends visiting, they want to say, let's take the tea, because that's the best way to go.
A couple of things, playing off what you said when Marty said, you mentioned the historic divestment in the system. We've talked about that ad nauseum for probably the whole 25 years we've been on the air. The two co-chairs of the legislature's Transportation Committee were with us a couple of weeks ago, Phil Lang, and Bill Strauss, who's the House chair, had this to say about an oversight hearing in which you had appeared a few weeks or days earlier. Here's Strauss.
Do you have available to you right now, I asked Mr. Ang, the funding you need to carry out both your operational and safety and capital needs? And he said, yes, but in the future we will need more.
Do you have enough money?
Do I have enough money? You know, we always need more funding. The challenge is, whatever you have, how do you put that to best use? Even in good times, there's always a need to do more projects. There's always a need to invest further. My challenge right now is to make sure that every dollar that I have, I'm putting to best use. And that means taking a look at our capital projects. How do we start delivering them on time and on budget? This way the public knows that if we are asking for funds, it's being best spent, and we're not misusing those funds, right?
Could you speed up the whole process that you're engaged in to fix this, the mess you were handed, if the legislature had appropriated more money for you now, not in the future?
Well, I would say this, too, right? How do you balance the amount of work that you need to do and balance the ability to provide service, right? So you have to also realize, if we had every penny that we're asked for or think we need, you would not be able to do every project on year one, right? You would have to still lay out a strategy to get the service back to safe, reliable, and robust, where the people are enjoying it. But then you also have to make sure you're continuing to move those projects that are building towards the future, because one thing has to supplement the other thing. Safe, reliable service gives me the ability to say, let's do these other projects, right? And at the same time, those other projects do facilitate the ability to maintain and run a system.
You know, speaking of safe, one of the things, this came before you, obviously, but the
Cash
death...
room?
No, we'll get to this is much more serious. The death of David Jones. Everybody remembers falling through the broken stairways at UMass JFK Station. What was almost as disturbing as the death itself of Mr. Jones was to read not too long after that the MBTA knew that there were major structural difficulties there and other places, and for whatever reason hadn't attended to them. Can you say today, Phil Lang, and wherever we are, August something or other, the 11th, that there are no similar situations that could lead to similarly disastrous outcomes somewhere in the system?
Well, I will say this. need to pay attention to our system has been top of my priority, right? Not only the speed restrictions, track, signal, power that allows us to run daily service, but the ability to make sure that our stations and our facilities where we're asking people to come in is a priority. That's why I made sure one of the things I noticed is that I want to have someone who's responsible, single point of accountability. The chief of stations, proud to say that accepted the role and will be starting on August the 28th. That doesn't mean that we're not continuing right now to take a look at all those types of elements within our stations that we need to make sure we're addressing. And
are you able to assure, though, that there are no situations today like what existed at UMass JFK on the day that David Jones died?
I would say our system is safe. I use the system every day.
Okay.
My family uses the system every day. We are paying attention to those things, but we are going to accelerate our inspections, and we're going to find those capital dollars to address them more timely if the situation arises. Those types of situations are unfortunate, and I don't want to comment too much on something that happened prior. All I know is moving forward, those are the types of things that we are going to be proactive with, ensuring that we have responsible, accountable employees, but also giving them the tools to be successful. I think that goes hand in hand with responsibility.
You know, I think it was called the Second Avenue train, the new train in New York City. Is that what it's called?
Second Avenue subway, yeah.
So you go to the regular subway, and then you go to this new, relatively new Second Avenue subway, and it's unbelievable how gorgeous it is and how gorgeous the trains are. That was billions and billions of dollars. So it gives you sort of an idea of how expensive it is to create a state-of-the-art subway now. So we're never really going to have that here.
I would not say we will never have that. I think what we need to do is take a look at the needs, and we need to prioritize how we address our stations, right? You can go in and we could renew, we can make them accessible, and we're going to be looking at a capital program in addition to the one that's just approved as we look beyond that to make sure that folks know that we are focused on those things. Now, does that mean there are future expansion projects down the road? I don't think I would ever say no to anything.
Yeah.
I think what we need to do is make sure we focus on our needs today. Let's make sure that the system and the stations that we have today are what people expect and deserve. But keep an eye on future development, because one of the things that I know is very important to us and the quality of life is the potential for development around our stations, whether it's businesses and housing. And those are the things that I enjoyed doing in my prior role. And Second Avenue subway was a very good example, because when that opened up, that whole corridor above, the dynamics changed there. So we have that opportunity here. And one of the things I intend to do is to get out and meet the different communities, different delegations, to see what are their priorities, what kind of development is there, and be at the beginning of the discussion versus after development decisions have been made. Because I've seen where development is built, and then they expect the service that we had not had those discussions with. So being there at the forefront, I think facilitates development interest, and allows us to be more prepared to provide that level of service that people need.
Where'd you get that? You got a very snazzy-looking T-pin.
He's head of the team, Marjorie.
I know, but I'm wondering, was that a special
No.
present for you? Or can we get them for
we
the
get them?
station? Or?
I'll get it pinned for both of you. Yes, they gave it to me on day one.
They
so
did. It was very, very
I cherish
nice.
it. And I wear it every day.
Although I don't know if you'd want to necessarily, if you were a regular Joe or Jane, I don't know if you'd want to wear a T-pin yet.
Yes, you will. You will take the same pride that I take in our system. I guarantee it.
Okay.
Should I guarantee it? I do guarantee it.
Phil Lang, can we have a behavioral question that I assume concerns you? It's playing off something Marjorie asked. By the way, mountains of people are saying the audio streaming's not working. And I'm about to tell you to go to YouTube, but then I realize if the streaming's not working, you probably can't. Oh, it's working now? Oh, it's... YouTube is working.
I
of
think
course,
our app is not working.
They probably can't hear
working.
us when we say, in any case, go to youtube.com/GBH News. We hope you hear us. In any case, a behavioral question. I'm a creature of habit. I think a lot of people are. And when, 59% or 60% of the people who are riding the T pre-pandemic have come back, that's close, right?
Yes, the numbers continue to get a little better, though.
Okay,
I
great.
think as service improves, we will see people come
But
back.
how do you worry about people, that's why I said creature of habit thing. People get locked into behaviors. they say, well, that's even a greater reason for me to do hybrid work than even before. It's even a better reason for me to drive my gas-guzzling car down the turnpike. Are you thinking ahead as you continue to make improvements and hopefully do the same kind of turnaround here you did at the LIRR about how do you message, I hate that verb, how do you communicate to the public that the system you thought was going to be that way forever is not that way now, and it's inviting you back? What do you do to get people to break their non-T habits in a year or 6 months or 2 years, whenever it is? You know what I mean?
Well, you know what? Things have changed, obviously, with the pandemic. The ability for people to work remotely has affected not only the T, but a lot of commuter rail services and subway services. But that's not necessarily, maybe from a ridership perspective, it has impacted our revenue, but I think from a quality of life perspective, people are able to balance those needs. What I would like to say, though, is that flexibility you have in your office environment, take advantage of it, right? Ride the T during different times of the day where perhaps it's not as crowded. Ride the T to go to your favorite restaurant. Ride the T to go see different cultural events that the great Commonwealth has to offer. Because it's not just about commuting in the morning and commuting back home at the end of the day. I saw those things changing. Having said that, we also know that we have a lot of essential workers that have to rely on public transit, and that's why it's important for us to continue to deliver those levels of service. But then how do we have folks take advantage of weekends and evenings and midday? You know, so those are the things where I welcome that challenge, and I really do know that there are so many places that people can enjoy taking the T. I firmly believe that today's youth are more transit-oriented than folks of my generation. And that's something else that is, I think, going to really help us thrive moving forward.
There are a bunch of texters who have a similar question to David from Arlington, who texted in, what's going on with the red line? Feels like the line north of Park Street has been left out to dry. Last I checked, it takes about 40 minutes to go from Alewife to Park Street. It's been bad enough that it's quicker for me to take the bus into work, even with traffic.
It's not that it's been left out to dry. We are continuously looking at resources to accomplish the work, working with our FTA partners, DPU. One of the other components is to make sure that we plan the work in a manner that our workforce and the resources we have can do it safely. So that has been something that I think has also been highly publicized, the ability for us to accomplish a lot of work that we need to do, but make sure we're doing it in a manner that we're protecting the workforce too, because they are just as important to us as protecting the public. If we protect the workforce, we can better deliver for the public, and those improvements will come.
Well, you know, speaking of protecting the workforce, I thought it was very unusual that the Federal Transportation Administration would come in and look at the T and really say that this before you came, but that we were not protecting the workforce. Is that unusual too? I mean, I think it is to have a federal agency crack down on a state's or city's MBTA system.
That has happened before. I mean, in D.C., there's an oversight agency helping them. They're a little further along. Those challenges came up sooner than us. But even when they don't come on and take over the oversight as they've done to this level, they're always playing a role with the regulations and making sure that agencies have policies and procedures in place, but then also that we're following them, right? So that's an important role they play. I don't have any concerns. If they're bringing extra resources to help make sure that our employees are safe and our work is being done properly, I welcome that. But it's not unusual necessarily. Maybe the amount of things that were brought up in the SMI report last year. But this is about improving us not only today but long term, and that's the key to one of the reasons I wanted to come back. Right? How do we set the T and the workforce up for success, well beyond whatever time frames I have.
Phil Lang, you've been very generous with your time. One last question. I'm just looking through the text. It seems to be a common one. I think we've had pilots in the past, obviously prior to you, about late-night T service. You expressed concern about workers who have no choice, and often it's low-income workers, as you know, I'm sure from New York City, too, who are working the most odd kinds of extreme hours. Is that something in your thoughts and plans? I know you're focused on what is first, but is that something you're contemplating internally?
Well, you know what? I would say this. The amount of work that we need to do right now, the ability to get in and do even regular overnight work is important, extended hours. But certainly as we improve things in the future, I think there's nothing that would be off the table. But really what we need to do is make sure the service we're running today is safe, reliable. I certainly understand the need for people to have access to transportation 24/7. A lot of roles rely on the ability to get into a system earlier than we have right now.
Very quickly, I said it was last. This is really the last. How do you feel about Michelle Wu's push for free public transit?
You know, public transit and the affordability of it is something that's on my mind. I think that gets to the intention of me trying to figure out how do we make sure we continue to deliver service as efficiently and safely as possible. But that's a much bigger discussion right now, right? Obviously, the revenue that we receive is important to our operating dollars.
Sure.
Bringing riders back is important, and not funding it strictly on the riders back because it has to be affordable. We are piloting a few things, as you mentioned.
Sure.
Right? The mayor has supported us with some bus money to provide free buses, and in support of some of the tunnel, we are running some free service as well. The Blue Line has been a good example for us to understand if you had free service, you know, what kind of impacts you have and what will people gravitate to. So we're learning about that, and I think that's all going to be part of a bigger discussion down in the future. But affordability of the system and safety, reliability are top of my priorities right now.
It's a pleasure to meet you. Really
It is a
glad
pleasure
you
to
were very
meet-
generous with your time. We hope you'll come back soon.
I know. I feel much better after talking with Phillip than I did before. I can't quite say I'm in the Ted Lasso category.